Cause I remember even, this has been 25 years ago, Jefferson was like a 3. Cause I always remembered how much cheaper the insurance was on houses in Jefferson versus Bush and Nebraska, just because of the ISO rating.
Right. That's right.
I mean, it was substantial.
But yours has improved. I think one year, maybe about 6 years ago, y'all were about a half a point from being down to a 3. But I think on the next evaluation, especially with your new water lines and water tank, I think y'all are gonna come out real good. Of course, you're requiring all your new subdivisions put in fire hydrants. And lines which have been modeled where you have adequate flow, because some of those places need 1,500 gallons a minute, where the houses are so close. But with your first and second phase of your water distribution system and your 2 tanks, you should be in very good shape, with fire flow throughout the, whole system. Again, with our discussions with Jackson, Barrow, and Winder, that's gonna determine where our new booster pump station will go. That'll kind of, set the course for our water system, what it looks like in the future. But regardless of what that supply is, your distribution system and your storage system is gonna be in very, very good condition. We just need to determine who our main supplier is gonna be going forward. I think that'll be determined in just a few months at best. Any questions on fire flow? And of course, this little map here, that's showing your first phase of your water distribution system, where all the new lines will be going. I think the worst disruption will probably be on White Street, very narrow right of way. Some of that street,
Yes.
some of that street will be, we'll necessarily have to cut paving. We looked at that several ways. To go through there and require a 20-foot easement from all the property owners, I think would be very, very disruptive, very unpopular. So it was decided where possible, most of the area would be cutting and patching, abandoning the old line and putting all new service lines.
Isn't that old line a 4-inch line down?
That's what I've heard. I don't know if it's been verified. You're right. And really, a 4-inch line doesn't really count for fire flow, honestly. ISO don't even recognize it for it. But those were used, at least you had some fire flow. You can put a little mini fire hydrant, we call them, on a 2.5-inch line and get some fire flow, but ISO just acts like they don't exist.
6 inch or greater, is that, or 8 inch or greater?
6 inches.
Six.
Yes, sir. So that'll be, I think we've got, 4 or 5 easements to go on the water line project. That will be coming back to, the city with the final design for your guys to look it over. We'll do an updated cost estimate. I think you've got that budgeted in bid this year. So we'll update that cost estimate and see what that looks like, and hopefully get that out to bid during this calendar year. I think it's in your budget for this year. So,
And all of our fire hydrants are working, right, Jim?
yes, sir. I think there were about 40 that had been taped up, but I think those have all been replaced. I don't know if any of them are not. And as you go in these developments, I've seen a couple of things that I had an afterthought about, but I know when, a couple of the subdivisions went in, we actually required them to get easements from the adjoining properties and tie some of the loops in where we got a good network. And there's been a couple times that's kind of slipped through the cracks and we didn't get those, but there's still always gonna be some opportunities to get good loops throughout the system. So going forward, we need to complete the acquisition process for this phase 1 water, advertise for bids, get that done this year. Again, complete negotiations with your major water supplier, decide where we're gonna put the booster pump, get that done. Carefully review new developments in the concept plans and review possible upgrades that will conform to the city's comprehensive water plan. Again, looking at possible easements, routes, tie-ins, that sort of thing. And then initiate long-term water and sewer planning for future developments within the entire service area. We talked about that. You got that southern area, we really have no plan for. There's something to think about in this year or next year. Start planning, what are we gonna do with those areas in our service area? We're gonna talk to Jackson County about some swapping the territories, or what makes sense there. Some of that property gets pretty narrow down there, and it's close to the river. I think some of that's probably not even very developable in the very bottom end down there. Before you get to the county line, what do you think, Shannon?
Yeah, I mean, if you go on past, about where the sand company is,
Right.
you know, he's kinda got a high hill right there off
That's right.
53, but
Right.
you're right, from there on down is to the river, to the crossing.
A lot of bottom land.
It's all bottom land. That was my aunt and uncle that lived right there on the right, and, you know, what, a half mile back, just past what Old Muddy Lake was right there.
Right.
And, I can remember as a kid, I mean, their basement, when we get major floods, the river come out of the banks. I mean, their basement would have a foot of water.
Wow.
Yeah, they never stored anything in there. And, you know, the mud wouldn't hurt, the water wouldn't hurt, but
Wow.
I can remember going over there as a kid.
Swim on the
So
basement.
there, and, you know, and they were on a septic tank. I mean, you know, everything out through there is on septic tank, so.
Sure.
But that house is still there today. I hardly ever see that river out of its banks anymore. When the sand company came in there, I used to float that river a lot and duck hunt on it. You know, the banks are deeper,
Yeah.
the water flows are much slower,
Right.
cause through that area, you pretty much have to paddle now, where it used to be moving water.
Yeah.
It's almost like the river never comes out of its banks anymore. And you can remember too, I remember the old bridge there at John's Barbecue when it used to flow over the top of the bridge.
Absolutely.
And they built that new bridge and, you know, I mean, you hardly ever see the water come out
Right.
in there anymore.
So, wait, go ahead.
I'm with you,
Yeah,
I don't
They
think
changed a lot.
there's no need to spend much money down there, cause there's not gonna, I don't think you'll ever see much development down there. Not past, Blankenship.
Right.
Yeah. Cole's got that property up there on, he bought on the top of the hill there, the old purple property, that part of the purple property.
Right.
So he may do something with it.
So wastewater treatment capacity is a lesser challenge, I don't know, but I think water and sewer is a challenge, but I think we've got some clear direction, and a lot of possibilities on our water supply. Of course, we can build wastewater capacity, and again, we're gonna, do some, real data analysis in the weeks ahead where we can get a good handle on our per capita use, or per customer use, and that sort of thing, get a real good handle on where we are there. We know we can meet our permit. Right now you have a three-phase permit. B1 is 100,000 gallons per day. We've already over that. We're in B2, which is 200, and then B3 they call it. You request EPD to allow you to go 2.5 million gallons a day. So we're probably getting fairly close to that. I see no reason why they wouldn't grant that. They just have that in there. You request the permission to go to 0.5 MGD. And what that does is that triggers a little bit more monitoring of the wastewater plant. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but anytime you step up in additional flow, you're gonna have some more testing, more monitoring required. Not that you can't meet it, it just takes more manpower to do those more frequent tests. But we're in good shape, up to 500,000. Our next phase, of course, is the expansion to 950. Estimated cost somewhere between 12 and 14 million. You've got a $2 million grant obligated to that project, and the balance would come from your reserve and tap fee funds and a GFA loan. At some point in time, and one thing I'm gonna do a side note on here, all of these agencies, ARC, GFA, USDA, EDA, any agency you get money from now requires you to go through a procurement procedure. It doesn't matter if your engineers work for you for 30 years, you gotta advertise and select your engineer based on the best qualifications. You know, honestly, we get about I've already gotten about 5 of those requests, today, this week already. You just have to advertise. And I'm not, of course, we always want Hoschton to select us, you know, quite honestly. But you select whoever's best qualified for your project. But the reason they do that is they've had some real dogs out there that haven't done a very good job, and I think y'all might have had some experience in that in the past.
Yeah,
We wanna make sure that the city makes a good decision on somebody that's a fit, for your particular community. But you're gonna have that procurement thing just to go through, and I think y'all just about completed that on this last round.
That's on the agenda,
Yes, for Monday.
yes.
But you've met that, and that's one of the requirements of GFA. Once we get a little further down the road, we'll be working like we usually do with your staff and doing basically a cash flow analysis, where we're at today. What's our income, what's our projected growth, and what's this loan gonna cost us? Right, and we'll come back to the city with some recommendations. Right now, I think, the fund you would go in is it's an EPA money, Environmental Protection Agency money that's passed through the states, and then the states turn around and loan that out at a reduced rate. And right now, the cheaper loan rate for a wastewater or clean water loan is 1.83%. I know the Federal Reserve is ratcheting these up. We might see an increase between now and we apply, I don't know. The GFA tries their best to keep the loan rates as low as they can. They're primarily there for cities, not the Savannahs. Atlanta and Savannah use GFA some, but they're kind of there for people like Hoschton. You know, get affordable money without having to go through the bond market and pay, you know, huge fees for bond brokers and that sort of thing.
So it's federal dollars we pay in as taxpayers.
That's right.
We're gonna give the federal government, they're gonna disperse it down to the state level.
That's right.
While we're paying taxes.
And they're gonna loan it back.
They're gonna loan it back.
That's exactly right.
How in the world?
They're gonna make money off your money.
That is correct.
That's what they do. It's a pretty good program.
But James, during the process, EPA pays a lot of salary for administration of that money to send it to Georgia. And then Georgia's pretty frugal, I'll give them that. They have GFA runs a pretty tight ship. They've got a staff of about 12, and they do get some money for administration, but their budget's pretty tight. They put they rely on the local governments a lot to manage that project like it's supposed to be, and the engineers to check the payrolls and all that stuff. They rely on locals a lot. They're not, they may come to your pre-construction conference, and they may come to your site once, but they just don't have the people. For the whole state, right now they have, like our Amanda Carroll at GFA, they've got 4 people like that managing the whole state of Georgia. Amanda's got 95 projects.
Holy cow.
So she's gonna rely on Hoschton and their engineers to, you know, don't want any waves on our project. Y'all manage everything and do it right, you know. She's got a lot of confidence in y'all. Y'all done a lot of projects with no problems.
And I want y'all to be sure you're aware that, you know, yeah, we may have to borrow some money to do this phase 2, this $12 million. But we got money, we're getting some grant money, and we constantly, you know, as these houses are built, you know, those $5,000 sewer tap fees go directly for this type of stuff. So you gotta figure 1,000 homes, $5 million. You know, 2,000 homes, $10 million. And that money is what goes to pay for this. It's not like we're going into debt, but it's like it's a rapidly paid off debt.
And we also do have $2 million of state fiscal recovery grant that's going toward that project as well.
Yeah.
So we are working on funding to help that.
Yeah, almost like, I won't call it free money, but extra money that we're not having to take off of water.
That's right,
So
it's not coming out of our bucket.
Very helpful.
yeah, we're fortunate, with the growth, we're getting enough money to pay for this infrastructure.
Right.
as we go. Versus, what was it, 10, maybe 13, 14 years ago, when they went deep in the hole and didn't really even have a way to pay it back.
That's exactly right.
It was a bad system.
Mhm.
It's that phase separator that's gonna be auctioned up. How much you gonna bid on that?
That'll be zero.
Our memorial garden.
Yeah,
Put it in the park or something. The kids play.
Yeah,
The historic, it's historic.
it
I
is.
know prehistoric, no. It's outdated.
So with your sewer tap fees, we kind of monitor what everybody's charging out there in our area. And we will report that to you occasionally. And see what the trends are. So right now, you're seeing anywhere from $15 to $20 per gallon of capacity in your tap fees. So, right now, if I'm a residential customer, I'm gonna pay the city $5,000 for my capacity. I'm paying for a little piece of the wastewater plant. So right now, I think we're, allocating 300 gallons, is that right, for an ERU? So I'm getting 300 gallons a day. Do I really need that? And should we reduce the ERU, equivalent residential unit, from 300 to 250? Keep the fee the same,
But decrease the usage.
decrease what we're allocating.
yeah, I mean,
It's not gonna hurt your residential. The only thing it'll really impact, is gonna be somebody that's not residential. So if you have a Publix coming in and they're gonna use, say, 9,000 gallons a day, right now, that's 30 ERUs. So 30 ERUs, they pay $150,000 for capacity. If you used, 250, they pay 180. This is something to think about. How much allocation, what do we do, wanna use up for our equivalent residential units? What we've seen is everybody moving down from 300. I've got a list of, I might have already sent this to some of y'all. I know, Rousing just reduced theirs to 250. Mine there's some weird figure like 241 or something like that, where they came from. But just about everybody's coming down
I
with
was
their
wondering about others.
ERU. But maybe it's something you wanna consider. Doesn't hurt the little guy, but it hurts or impacts commercial. But it gives you the $20 a gallon back in your fund to help fund the wastewater capacity.
Well,
Right
Jerry,
here.
we're in line with our tap fees, correct, with other cities?
You are.
Okay.
But you can lower the ERU and still be in line.
well, what kind of process is that, Jimmy? To lower that number?
You just change your policy or your ordinance, wherever it's written.
What are we at right now, Chrissy, right now?
Pardon?
What are we at?
300. I'll send that data out to y'all.
You hear what we were talking about, Jim?
I'm sorry.
About lowering our
Yeah,
ERU
from
number
300
to 250?
Yes, but you're gonna send, you said an email out to, that we can
Look at.
They're still giving a
We can
residential
ponder.
user 7,500 gallons a month, and they don't use that.
Right,
When they give you a little more money on your commercial, you can probably afford it,
but you did
and
say
build
it
your
would,
fund up for capacity.
you did say it would impact someone like Publix or.
It would,
Like
it
something,
would.
okay.
If it's not something that's gonna be a deal breaker.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's not gonna decrease residential.
Right, especially when you're surrounding counties like in the city.
Yeah, for South County, of course, their wastewater treatment is, they're up in the Chattahoochee Basin, and their cost for wastewater capacity, and they're of course growing very rapidly, is right at $30 a gallon. So, you've got three things going on with EPD. Your anti-degradation analysis, which was finished right at the first of the year. That's under review. That's the economic analysis that basically they require to prove that it's not feasible for you to go buy 300 acres of land and spray rather than discharge, which was easy to prove.
Right.
And also, in that same document, it shows that you approach the adjacent communities for, 450,000 gallons of additional capacity. Nobody has that. And it also meets the letter of the law. That's just a rule, federal government rule that's passed down to the state. So you got your anti-DAG into, EPD under review right now. The next step is the environmental, information document. That's almost complete as well. Once we get some indication from EPD on, anti-DAG approval, we'll submit the, environmental. Also have that available and advertise it for, not a public hearing, but a public meeting. Make those two documents available to the public for comment. Be advertised, say, May 1, just as hypothetical, May 1, and it has a 30-day comment period. Following that, you have your public meeting, have minutes, turn that into EPD. Once they approve those two documents, they'll start reviewing the design development report. The DDR has also been complete, but we can't submit it till these other two documents are completed through the EPD review and through your public meeting. But we're ready to pull the trigger on that. The design development report is a thick report that shows how we're going to go about expanding and building the new facilities at the wastewater plant and meet permit requirements. What all's gonna be in there. What's the headworks gonna look like, what's the clarifiers gonna look like, how we're gonna meet permit, and how's everything gonna work. It's almost a model that shows how much is coming in, how we treat it, what happens, what's the final effluent gonna be. They can read all that and see what we're going to build in the final planning stages and how it will meet permit. We've been very engaged with your, staff. We're very operator oriented. We're building this plant for Hoschton, not EMI. So we have your operators engaged. And every operator has their preferences, don't they, Fletcher?
Yes, they do.
And, we try to match that. I mean, it's nothing, well, we have had a few, that are a little bit off center, but, you operators, your guys are pretty awesome. They know what they're doing, but we like, some people like a Ford, some people like a Chevrolet, but we pretty well tailor. We're still gonna meet permit. We're not gonna do anything outlandish, but we're gonna pretty well tailor that plant to Hoschton. What your guys like to operate, what they're used to, every wastewater plant has a personality, that kind of reflective of your operational staff. So anyway, that's what the DDR, once all those three documents are done, you'll be free to finish your final plans on the wastewater plant. It's not going near as fast as we would like it to. I had a conversation this morning with Curtis Boswell. He was one of the higher ups at EPD. He's retired now, but he does a lot of liaison work for us behind the scenes. And things are very slow at EPD. In the wastewater division, there's only 2 people in Atlanta reviewing these kind of documents.
Yeah.
2. And they're pretty overwhelmed right now. They've got a lot of stuff on their plate. They'll never catch up. They can't catch up. And they have, engineers, senators, cities, always calling when you get their project, put on time. That's a little discouraging right now as far as thinking, moving forward. Once we get to the final planning stages, the plan reviewers are pretty quick, but all these front-end documents, quite honestly, EPDs, we're a very small system, but you get into some of these bigger ones, with these anti-DAGs, you have a lot of citizen lawsuits, these big 50 million gallon per day wastewater plants going into the Savannah River and all that. There's a lot of controversy with those. We're a drop in the bucket, but still, they're worried about citizen lawsuits.
Sure.
So that's part of it. So that's another reason I'd like to get a real good, handle on, you know, what we've committed to, what our, per capita and per customer usage is, you know, see, cause, you know, we're talking about getting this thing online 2024. I hope that really happens, but, I'm still a little discouraged, honestly, just telling you the truth of what we're dealing with as far as getting through it. So another thing we might wanna talk about, we're looking at, monthly water produced and bought and billed out to the customers. I'd like to see a similar, situation where we're seeing how much we're treating. And, see, we don't really know right now if we've got how much infiltration inflow of groundwater we might have flowing in there. Maybe just a little, maybe 20,000 gallons a day, but if you think about 20,000 gallons a day, yeah,
That's a lot.
maybe 100 houses, you know? So, it'd be good to track how much you've, treated and how much you've built sewer-wise. It's not gonna be dead on accurate, but a trend over time, over a year's time, you say, well, there's a lot of difference there. And we know during rain events, you do have infiltration inflow. We also know that this new main sewer trunk line that's being put in is gonna take a lot of the, ongoing infiltration inflow out. Be interesting to see how much lower that is. I would say during the rainy periods, it's gonna be a pretty good bit. But then on your dry weather flows, it'll be interesting to see how much is eliminated as well. So if we eliminate any kind of groundwater going into our system, that's free capacity we're freeing up that we can sell. So I think it's good to keep a handle on that.
Is that tracked monthly? Would you track that monthly?
I would, yeah. It's real
That's easy
simple.
for us to do.
Yeah, I would say.
Because Karen has the numbers of the usage,
Yeah.
you just gotta get Brett, to take a read, and they'll have it done.
And just put it on the form, track it every month. And once you got a year's, it's kinda like the, water audit, once you got some baseline data, you'll see where you are.
Didn't we talk about that at the last staff meeting? And then the report? Yes.
Oh, I must don't see it.
So based on projections we have in-house, and based on 250 gallons, per customer per month, we could have, peak flows of 2.5 million gallons a day by 2040. According to this. And I'm not advocating, let's go ahead and build a 2 MGD plant. But if we start getting these trend lines tracked, I think we can project probably when we will need to go to 2 MGD. Because again, I have to look at Galveston and Jefferson and their customer base, and they're right at 1 million. And we're not even near where they are. So,
It's a population over 10,000, 12,000.
yes, sir. And I think Brazelton and Jefferson both have, they actually have some customers outside the city, in the service area, but outside the city. So, based on water customers, Brazelton's probably got a population close to 14,000 on the service area, not the city. So this is a little, next sheet is kind of what your, next phase of the wastewater plant will look like. Again, we're still gonna have these new facilities go about where the pond used to be. So when you bought that land years ago and got all the land for the pond, it's been, of course, closed for many years. That's freed up land for a wastewater plant. This next phase, it takes you right up to 1 million gallons a day. We'll again, take the headworks basically takes all the biodegradable material coming into the head of the plant, screens it out, puts it into a dumpster. That's gonna be sized for 2 MGD, and at the very tail end of the plant is the, ultraviolet disinfection facility, that's gonna be sized for 2 MGD. You'll have some blank spaces for future, UV bulbs, but at least the structure will be built. You'll be adding, additional orbital units. Your orbital units are, what provides most of the treatment. You're providing, 2 new clarifiers, and then you'll be, adding biosolids management or a sludge press in that building number 8. Right now, you have what we call the Taj Mahal, building there. I think if anybody's been down to the wastewater plant, you have,
Building on stilts, right?
yes, sir. That cost a lot of money. I've not seen one like that. Typically, they're built at ground level, and then you have a, shelter for your roll-off container, and it just augers in there. They come and get.
Conveyor or auger.
Yeah, I think that was an expensive proposition, but the problem is they only size that building for 500,000 gallons a day. So we're very restricted. It's, kind of an operation and maintenance nightmare. So unfortunately, that will, not be used any further. But you may have an opportunity, I don't know what condition the, belt press is in, but I think there's a market for those, right, Fletcher? Pins, get that one out of there.
Yeah, it's a very small belt press. It's a high quality belt press, but it is small and.
So for a smaller entity that might serve it as.
Right.
Where do they take the waste that goes in that dumpster,
That's a good question. Goes to the landfill.
which we have to pay for?
Yes, sir.
How much per dumpster?
Ooh, very expensive, very expensive.
Cause it's biohazard, correct?
Not really, it's just a lot of weight.
Polymer fortified.
A lot of volume.
Infused.
So see, it's packed right before it goes in that dumpster?
It's, fairly packed. That's a good thing to talk about, because all the landfills are going through a process of, reevaluating their policies regarding the acceptance of biosolids from cities. It takes up a lot of room, it's getting more and more expensive. Of course, it costs y'all a lot of money to haul it there, to dispose of it there, and then you bring the, container back. And I know in Forsyth County, there was a large landfill that had some issues with biosolids, because there was so much water in there, so wet, caved in. It's real problems up there, so all the landfills are, looking for a higher compression ratio, if you will. Fletcher, you wanna kind of talk about that a little bit? I know we operate several systems that are getting pretty deep into that problem.
Yeah, so as Jerry was talking about, the compression ratio of the solids, and that's tied to the moisture content, which is specific to solids processing and dewatering. So generally, a belt press can process solids anywhere between 12 to 15%. So we're talking 12 to 50% solid, the rest of it's moisture. So that's disposed of in a landfill, and you can imagine over a period of time, the amount of moisture that is released within those solids, it creates compaction issues as they're bringing all this other solid waste in. And then they're putting soil on top of that and trying to compact that, and eventually as it builds, they plant grass on it and seed it, and then they've got the leachate they have to treat over a period of time. And they have permit requirements that pertains to solid waste management, just as the city has with their wastewater treatment plant. So there are facilities that are having to meet a higher compaction ratio and a higher density when it comes to solids processing. So one, they've increased their amount of cost to dispose of in these landfills. For instance, the recent costs that we have seen on average, tipping fees have been around $70 to $75 a ton for disposing of solids in landfill. Those costs are now, we see, are around $130 a ton. Those are the costs we're seeing now. And there are specific landfills, for instance, Jerry had mentioned the one in Banks County, it's the R&B landfill. They have stopped accepting municipal solid waste for municipalities that have contracts with them. And they're requiring them to be hauled to another landfill, which has the process of being able to, treat the solids in order to meet the higher compaction ratio that's being required. So those costs are even becoming higher. So what we are seeing, and we're starting to have some internal conversations at EMI, due to this issue that has just, I mean, this is pretty recent. This is not something that has been talked about for years, but it's become recent about having to, initiate additional solids treatment other than just a belt press or a screw press or a plate press, which generally can process solids to 10, 12, 15%. Screw presses can generate 20, 21%. So that is something that's on the horizon in order to try to bring that manageable cost down. Because when you look at, $70 a ton to $130 a ton, that cost is just it's a lot of money. It's not going anywhere. So if you can increase the compaction ratio, decrease the moisture content, then you have less solids to deal with. So not only is it gonna decrease your cost to dispose of it, but it's gonna decrease the volume that it's actually consuming in the landfill.
So we would do away with building J and go over to building 8 with everything, according to the map, right, or no?
I think that's right.
Yes.
Yes, I'll build it S, I'm sorry. Is that 8? Yeah, S. So really there's a lot of plants still doing that compaction with like we're doing with the dumpster?
Yeah, there's a lot of, that is how solid processing is still, being implemented with municipal wastewater systems. I mean, what we do see though is that more systems are going to additional treatment. There's this one process, it's called a solar dryer, which uses, solar activity, constant tilling. It's basically inside a greenhouse. And they add, different types of chemicals to the solids, and solar, sun and air and tilling on a continuous basis that produces a higher drier cake, if you will.
Similar to the old dry.
It smell like cake,
Yeah.
it tastes like cake.
Yeah, like an old drying bed.
But
Yeah.
it looks like cake. But less,
Yeah,
Yeah,
not an open air site, you're saying it's decontained.
Yeah.
What we're talking about. So
that's correct.
So there's no
More environmental
organic
friendly than
company,
drying bed.
no organic company would buy this.
Well, there are, as ironically, next week I'm meeting with a company in another utility that we work in, that is interested, and speaking with that utility about potentially going down that road. You have to treat the solids to a higher, content. They call it a Class C sludge. It typically falls into lime stabilization and heat generation, kills pathogens and viruses that's in the sludge. And then at that point in time, you can use it for fertilizer.
Bag it up in organic.
That's
well organized.
Yeah,
Wow.
instead of calling it black cow, it's,
Black human.
black human,
Yeah,
yeah,
whatever.
black people,
I
whatever
think
you
it's
call it.
I think it's a waste of resources putting it in the landfill personally.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
Kill the pathogens and repurpose it.
Yeah, and it, I mean, it does have, nitrogen content and makeup, which uses a perfect fertilizer, just like the other byproducts that we see from cows and such that's used for fertilizer.
It's just kind of bizarre a little bit, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is processed, so.
There is some areas of Georgia that land apply. In areas where the land is cheap, there's a lot of pasture land, flat land. They have trucks that go out and basically inject it into the soil. It's very unpopular in North Georgia. That's never gone. I don't know if anybody does it. North Georgia Union Point used to do it years ago.
Yeah, they don't even do it anymore.
Why not?
Just the perception, some of the odor, I mean, I don't know. how
Some of
many
the
of y'all-
chicken plants still do it.
Yeah, there's a lot of areas that, dispose of chicken litter on pastures, and
That
people complain
is-
about just the odor.
Yeah.
And that's chicken litter,
About
imagine
3 days.
human waste.
Yeah.
The dudes.
Yeah, you can't walk by it.
Baconators and stuff like that probably don't not the same as just eating grass.
Right, yeah, no. So that is something that, is going to have to, be evaluated,
So at some point, we'll probably be at the mercy of the landfills.
well, you're gonna be at the mercy of landfills to some degree, but I believe based on some of the current technology that's out there and the processes that can be implemented, that you can produce a solids, that would meet the compaction and limit the amount of product that you're disposing of, yeah, and now, there's gonna be obviously some capital expense up front and operational expense that's gonna go into that. But in the long term, again, you're reducing the cost to dispose of, but more importantly, you're reducing the volume of area that you're utilizing within these landfills. And that's ultimately what they're after.
How much can we put on your farm? We put a lot on. And Kim, would you?
I don't think my neighbors would like that.
Lauren, would you like that?
No, I would not.
Okay, that's out then.
But knowing that, we're gonna be looking at that as we get into your design process, with your biosolids management there. We're not gonna put an antique in there, we're gonna be looking at, you know, these new things we have to deal with. Same thing with your, UV system, since you put your original UV system in, those systems have really progressed in the last decade, and, a lot less maintenance, very user friendly. You look at that new technology as well. So in our wastewater collection system, when we first started working in Houston, we did of course, your original sewer system put in 1980, 42 years ago. A lot of those original lines are still there. We did an evaluation survey, in 2015. At that time, we had 52,000 feet of sewer line. We're probably 1.5 times that at least now. 244 manholes. We did televising of all the sewer lines, inspected all the manholes. Did a big, book, with some recommendations on rehab and sewer line repairs. You made some repairs. One of the big things, the White Street pump station, was taking in a lot of water there with the stream that came by there. We totally eliminated that pump station and put in new lines upstream of that and new lines from there over to, the, other pump